Let's start out our dimensioning by checking the units. We're in inch, pounds, and seconds. So when I edit the document units, one of the things I want to see is that on the length we're in 2 decimal places. So industry standard is going to be plus or minus 10 thousandths, plus or minus 15 thousandths at 2 decimal places. Most of these we're going to want to be plus or minus 5 thousandths on sizes and locations. So let's go ahead and hit OK. And we'll come over to sheet 2. Now to apply dimensions, we're going to go into the smart dimension very much like in the sketch, and I can pick an object, I can pick between 2 objects, and I could pick the vertices. Alright, so picking the object's probably going to be about as easy. And I kind of want to think about my my overall layout. If we're lining up for the holes, and one of the basic rules is that if we're not going to apply a dimension to one of the views, we probably don't need that view. All right, so as I'm applying the dimensions, since I've foregone the title block, there is no default tolerance on this. So in effect, we're going to be working in inches, even though we did the design in metric. So we're going to kind of just pay attention to these numbers as we go. And I'll locate for the first hole. And then we can come off, and I'm looking for those center marks. And we'll just use a reference datum. Alright, so if this looks a little bit different, it's because I am in the ISO, and ISO is kind of my preference. I like the layout, but if you want to switch, we're going to go back into the edit document units, go to the drafting standard, and instead of ISO modified, you're going to go to ANSI. Probably still want to go back and check the units that were in 3 decimal places, and that's going to, main difference is that vertical. Instead of aligned to the extension and dimension lines, it's now vertical in between. All right, so if you have a lot of geometry that you're stacking up, the ISO is actually a little more compact, and you can go with either one that you prefer. All right, so I'm going to go back to ISO. Didn't come back to modified. Alright, so that gives me a few to work with. And then to smart dimension, we'll get our thicknesses. And we have a radius. So I'm just going through and applying the dimensions. Don't really like the direction of the arrow, so if I click on the handle, that will flip the arrow. Let's see, we have a couple of more, so let's go there, and this is one that we made the assumption that there were 4, so if I need to update, then I can put the 4 times and radius of 0.472 or 12 millimeters. Let's see, we have anywhere we have the hole, we're going to try the hole call out first. So if I do the hole call out on the pattern, well, 236 through, but because this was not a hole wizard, it didn't come up with my instance count. So 236 through, that's okay. So watch what happens if I just put the dimension on it. Smart dimension looks pretty standard. There's no through call out. I'd have to write that in as well. So we'll come over 8 times, 236 through, and we need a datum, so probably this back face. I don't know that what we're really locating on. All of our motion is over here. So let's come off of the back, and that'll keep us kind of in line with the dimensions on our the original sheet that we're working from. Alright, so if we were to chain dimension these, going from point to point and setting, each one of these dimensions has its own tolerance. So because this could grow or shrink 5 thousandths, this can grow or shrink 5 thousandths, this can grow or shrink 5 thousandths, all of a sudden this hole could be off 15 thousandths or plus or minus, and it would still meet our tolerance zone. So chaining dimension, there are reasons to change dimension, but for the most part we're going to stay away from it. Alright, so from that, and we can do the baseline. So picking that that dimension, and we're going to start to run out of room. So as this gets a little more complicated, I may want to, if I do a Control Z, I can come over to the Smart dimension, do the down arrow, and pick an ordinate dimension. Alright, so if we were doing ordinate dimension, we would probably want to do it throughout, but just to be able to illustrate the technique, the advantage of the ordinate is it picks that same datum reference, or a location to measure from. And because I just pick the ordinate, whichever line I go for, the vertical in this case or the horizontal is going to determine which way the dimensions are going to go. All right, so a little bit cleaner. And like I said, it doesn't really bother me to mix the dimensions, but I would probably, if I was producing this for manufacture, I would probably go back and put these items in ordinate as well, just so that it has that consistency across all of the views. All right, so as far as the text, we'll probably just give that a note to match. And one of the things when we look at the manufacturing process, there is such a thing as a single point, which would try to trace this. And this is not any of the fonts that we create. We're probably not going to pocket these out, try to follow that exactly with a really small end mill. And because that surface is set back, it's not really going to help us. So we'll have to make some decisions when we get to the manufacturing side. All right, so let's see, just a quick glance. Oh, I put in, oh, that was for the radius. I missed the one dimension. So let's go with the hole call out again. All right, so when we get to the hole wizard, we're going to see a little bit different. And yeah, let's go ahead and put in the 2 times. There's another place that we can access that's a little bit more convenient sometimes. So, all right, so that gives us our first run of dimensions. We'll go into sheet 3. Some point I'll want to hit Control S and save, and we'll just let it save all. Alright, so looking at this, my decision is I don't mind top to bottom, but when I look at this, I really kind of think I just want to rotate these over, so I'm going to delete the top view. And to position this view, I'm going to select it, go into rotate view. It's symmetrical, so it really doesn't matter if I go 90 degrees. It's warning me that any dependent views will be affected, and if I've applied dimensions, I'll lose those dimensions. So you want to do this very early in the process, not wait. All right, so as it rotates over, the views that look the same, now I'm looking at the end. All right, so when I pick these, we pick our datum, and I go between the 2 items, and we'll just kind of stack those up. Okay, and then let's go with the outside diameter, and then if I were to do the inside diameters, now let's see if I can get it to, alright, so the hemispheres are showing the direction, so 394, and let's see if I can get Nope, still not quite the one I'm looking for. So, alright, so 394. Alright, so very similar. Gives me all of the geometry. We didn't really put any edge breaks on these, so we may come back and when we optimize and look at those. So again, the process, I pick the first, go into rotate. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees and apply. It's always going to warn me, yes, I want to make that change. And then I don't need the top view since it now takes the place of the right view. And I believe we did a 3-to-1, so again I'm going to go look for the properties. And if you don't have the properties shown, I don't know if I've modified this one already, but let's go into, we expand out the full context menu, come down to customize, and I don't really delete out of this so much as I do the properties, so I would uncheck delete, check properties, and then that's going to allow me to pick on the properties, and we'll set a 3-to-1. Maybe. Alright, so that picked a view. Let's see what's going on. Alright, so over on the parameters, on the properties for scale, if I switch over to use sheet scale, that's going to bump it up a little bit. And then the isometric is staying at the custom scale. So we're pretty much going to go through the same process. And we'll apply a few dimensions. Alright, so again I can pick the geometry, that little symbol that popped up. Let's see if I can get it again. That's called a silhouette edge. And what it's doing is where the plane passes through the cylinder, it creates a line at the top of the cylinder and a line at the bottom of the cylinder. So silhouette edges are something that's pretty handy that we'll be able to utilize later. Alright, and then we get our overall. Okay, so on the other part, it was pretty much symmetrical. And if I'm going to use this as the baseline, then I might want to include a dimension that gives this length. But since it is a duplicate dimension, this and this adds up to this. I have to decide which has the priority. So in this case, let's see if I can get there it is. We get the little box to pop up, and then I can add parentheses. So this is the same as coming over to the properties and adding the parentheses. So anytime we see parentheses, those are going to be our reference dimensions, that they are not the they're not the tolerance critical dimension, but they provide a reference so that it will make the manufacturing a little bit easier. Going over to sheet 5. So let's go ahead and shrink that down. We'll go to custom scale, and since we were at 2-to-1, we'll drop that, well, maybe not to 1/2, but 1-to-1. And notice that I clicked on the hidden lines visible, so it's got a little bit different look. And I go either way with hidden lines visible. So let's see, is this one following the parent? Use parent scale, use parent style. Alright, so this is going to show those internal geometries. If it adds value and it helps you to read the print, that's one thing. But if it's not, I think my habit is just to stay with hidden lines removed and only utilize kind of that silhouette as needed. Alright, so I think it's a cleaner look, and everybody kind of has their own preferences. So if there's a company standard, we go with the company standard. Alright, so our dimensions again. We'll pick up the radius and the diameter. And the difference between the radius and diameter is that we have picked an arc, and here we have picked the circle. If for some reason I wanted to show this as a diameter, I can come over to the leaders and I can switch it to a diameter. Alright, so if it helps with the readability, that might be something we would go with. Alright, and then I don't want to maybe add more dimensions, so 2 times and 2 times. Alright, and let's see on the whole wizard. Alright, 394 through. And we'll need the 2 times. So let me see if I can get that little box to come back up. Escape. Alright, so it doesn't look like it's doing it on the whole callout. There it is on the linear dimension. So this is where we can set tolerances. We have the text that I entered. Alright, you got a little context adjustment right there. Alright, so next smart dimension, if I go between the circles, then I can get the center to center. And again, if I wanted a reference, I can go between the circles, or I can hold down the shift button, and because I'm picking on the perimeters, I'm going to be able to get that max condition. So again, this is going to be for reference, so we'll go ahead and put some parentheses around it. If I decide I don't need it, I could go ahead and delete it. Or on the arc conditions, we can look at centers, we can look at mins and maxes. Alright, different combinations that you don't get when you just pick center to center. Alright, so we need a thickness, smart dimension. And that looks pretty good. One more on the radius. So let's put that over here. And we'll reverse the arrow. And if we come over too far, it's going to give us that extension arc. So yeah, it looks pretty good. We have most all the geometry. I'm going to try and bring the box up one more time. There we go. And so 4 times, and then we just click out and have our shape. Alright, so the next ones are pretty much going to be the same, so I will probably call it pretty good and just go ahead and add those same types of dimensions to these and finish out this portion of the drawing.